Oh, Pokemon, it's 2018, and you have somehow become a game from the 1990s. But Proto, what are you talking about? Pokemon was released in the 90s. Astute of you viewers. If you recall, yes, Pokemon was not only released in America in the late 90s, but in Japan as well in 1996. But what if I told you Pokemon has become a very popular game known as Earthbound? That's right, ladies and gentlemen, you'll be surprised to know that Game Freak took a game that was almost 20 years old and took it as the blueprint for its newest games, Pokemon Ultra Sun and Moon. But before we get into that, I want to let you know that my Patreon has changed a bit. People still get to see the videos day early, but you're also going to be entered into monthly giveaways for new games, video game consoles, and classic games, as well as Pokemon plushies, depending on the reward tier you donate to. $1 gets you entered into a brand new game, $60 value each and every month. So check into that if it sounds cool to you. But for now, it's time for us to check out how Ape became Game Freak, or rather, how Game Freak became Ape. Some of you might be a little bit confused and saying to yourself, well, hang on a second, I've heard about Game Freak, but their name isn't on Pokemon, so how did they have a hand in Pokemon at all? Well, it's widely accepted that Game Freak is basically the Pokemon company. It's not, but it is. There's a lot of developers that cross over to Nintendo, that cross over to Game Freak, that cross over to the Pokemon company. So let's just get that out of the way without going into depth and explaining every developer's role and which company they belong to. Game Freak itself was a company that was established way before the 90s, and if you know any history, Pokemon took multiple attempts to be approved by Nintendo themselves. Pokemon almost didn't happen, believe it or not. At the time, Iwata, one of Nintendo's best loved, most extensive game developers, worked for previous company HAL in developing some interesting games. But if you're curious on all the games that he had a hand in and the games that he worked on, you should really ask what games Iwata did not work on instead for Nintendo or Nintendo systems. Searching for Iwata and Earthbound alone will bring up many search results of Iwata saving Earthbound. But what does that have to do with Pokemon? Much less Ultra Sun and Moon. I mean, these games are very new, and again, rest in peace Iwata, but he really wasn't around towards the end of the developmental cycle of these games. So, what's gives? What's the deal? Put simply, Iwata not only saved Earthbound, but helped to produce it, but he also saved Pokemon by coming up with an interesting programming system for Generation 2 to allow for a post-game Kanto area. Oh, and he saved Pokemon Stadium 2 also with kind of the same programming. So yeah, there's that. It essentially allowed them to put more memory where it shouldn't have been possible. He was a genius. He allowed for Pokemon to be bigger and better than what it originally would have been without him. Pokemon Ultra Sun and Moon has some glaring changes to the core Pokemon series, but moreover, some of these changes are blatantly taken from Earthbound itself. So I want to emphasize that Nintendo owns the rights to Earthbound, so if they want to take a good game from one of the most iconic RPG games of all time, and they want to take the good from it, then good on them. Was that too many goods? Man, I'm totally gonna fail English if this was an English paper. Good thing it's not. So let's take a look at this. Ultra Sun and Moon takes place on an island. Earthbound is more similar to the regions of Pokemon, while Ultra Sun and Moon are more akin to Earthbound's successor, Mother 3, which starts you out instantly on an island. And by the way, a villain who was defeated in the past returns in Earthbound's sequel, Mother 3, and his name was Porky, or Pokey for the mistranslations of Earthbound itself. Kind of like how Team Rainbow Rocket returns, and an iconic villain there, Giovanni. Yeah, kind of strange that that happens, right? But we're getting ahead of ourselves. You ever battle a Pokemon and notice that it will call for help? Straight from Earthbound, which is extremely annoying, by the way, when facing totem Pokemon, because while the bosses of Earthbound were very serious, they did not call for help. However, the bosses were often accompanied by smaller enemies, similar to Ultra Sun and Moon. Battling 2 against 1 is typical RPG tropes, and in the early stages of Earthbound, fighting multiple sharks at once, several slugs at once, it sounds less exciting and dangerous than what it really is, but it happened in Earthbound a lot more than it actually happened in other games, where massive bosses were accompanied by smaller enemies and enemies called for help. You might say that this paved the way for that, but I'm sure there's other games that also had that idea. They maybe just didn't incorporate it the way Earthbound did. Both lead protagonists wear shorts, a shirt, and a hat, just like Ness did, and that extends over to a lot of the Pokemon games, but, you know, nevertheless. What is up with Nintendo's cap fascination? I'm telling you, Link with a hat, Mario with a hat, Ness, Pokemon's protagonists. I mean, man, they really love hats over there. Entering different worlds and dimensions in Ultra Sun and Moon is so similar to in Earthbound, how players had to go to a different realm and time to fight the final boss. Even food items are used in Pokemon Ultra Sun and Moon, sort of to mirror Earthbound, like the malasada, the lemonades. Just like Earthbound had burgers and fries and pizzas and literal food, this was to parry the socialization and the way the world was at the time. Burgers, pizzas, fries, fast food, stuff like that. And yeah, Pokemon has seen items for a long time and seen these things for a long time as well in some instances, which is likely where it got its base influences from, which would have been Iwata, because again, several developers from Earthbound worked together and were working at Nintendo, and Nintendo has a big influence on Game Freak and the Pokemon Company these days, so there you go. The type advantage system in Pokemon matches up with the Psy in Earthbound, and many monsters are resistant to certain attacks, like ice or fire, and some of them are even immune. And unlike many RPGs of the time, these Psy attacks can miss too. In most RPGs, when you used a psychic attack, a magic attack of some kind, what would end up happening is that it would just hit the enemy, even if your character was inaccurate and couldn't hit them with a physical move. In Earthbound, your attacks can miss, believe it or not. The battle system, the events, the unique variety of enemies, the music, the sound effects, everything is inspired from Earthbound. Inspired, not ripped off. You could even really stretch what I'm saying and claim that the Z moves are variations of Psy moves that were learned through Earthbound, like Starstorm, but again, that's reaching a bit far. Maybe move tutors? I don't know. Again, you're reaching pretty far, and you don't have to reach with how many influences there are from Earthbound to Ultra Sun and Moon, so why reach? But now comes the bonus round, where a lot of these things are not exclusive to Earthbound, but many RPGs share this. Ready? Here we go. Critical hits, stat gains, items used to increase stats permanently, temporary stat boosting items, held items being just like equipment, the ability to gain more party members. Instead of people dying, they come to their senses and become tame, just like feigning, among many more. And there is one more similarity, the icing on the proverbial cake. Ness's father talks with him in the series, but is never really shown to be an active physical person playing a role like Ness's mother in the game itself. Just like the player's family in Pokemon Ultra Sun and Moon, most of the games, for that matter, excluding Generation 3, it's a going joke about where your father actually is. With all that said, these are just some of the similarities that I noticed between both Earthbound and Pokemon, and are extremely inspired by our world, socially, historically, even mythologically, believe it or not. How many legendary Pokemon are based on myth? Yeah, you get what I'm saying. I honestly would not be surprised if 8 did not disband and just went and joined Nintendo, Game Freak, or the Pokemon Company nowadays. But one thing's for sure, if anything, all these similarities made Pokemon less a generic RPG and one of the world's best-selling, most unique franchises of all time. And it was all thanks to a few developers from an old game. What similarities did you find that I missed? Let me know in the comments down below. And yeah, you know what? Leave a like if you enjoyed this video as well. And leave a dislike and some constructive criticism to make this show better. I've been your host, Protomario, and I'm signing out. As always, good gaming, God bless, and thank you for watching. I'm off to join a group and paint some things blue. But don't you worry about me, ladies and gentlemen. I'll be sure to avoid painting the cows.